Highwood is a wood near Bazentin-le-Petit in the Somme département of northern France. After the big British attack on the 14th of July 1916, Highwood lay undefended for most of the day, but delays in communication and confusion caused by orders and counter-orders from different British Corps headquarters with overlapping responsibilities led to the occupation of Highwood being forestalled by German reserves, which had moved forward to counter-attack British troops in the villages of Bazentin-le-Grand and Bazentin-le-Petit. Men from the 7th Division managed to occupy the southern half of the wood, and two cavalry squadrons advanced on the east side to Wood Lane, which connected the wood to Longueval. On the 15th of July, the wood was evacuated by the survivors and the cavalry retired. The British Fourth Army and the German Second Army and First Army fought for control of the wood from the 14th of July to the 15th of September. During the Battle of the Somme, both sides had many casualties and chronic communication problems. Inclement weather, grounded aircraft obscured the view and slowed movement on the roads, which had been severely bombarded and turned to mud as soon as it rained. Trenches and shell holes filled with water, which made infantry movement exceedingly difficult, and exhausted trench garrisons. The British and French found it impossible to arrange coordinated attacks and fought many small piecemeal actions, rather than general attacks, until the 15th of September. British-French cooperation broke down again, and the French did not attack on the 15th of September. When the British captured the wood during the Battle of Flers-Courcelette, the German defenders had great difficulty finding fresh troops for the Somme front, despite ending the Battle of Verdun, and had to send divisions to the Eastern Front and to Romania after it declared war on the 27th of August. Turnover of German divisions was high, and many had to be withdrawn and replaced after 14 days in the front line. The Germans lacked the resources to make many big organized counter-attacks, and those at Highwood and the vicinity were often as costly and ineffective as corresponding British attacks. Background: Highwood, the French name for the wood, was Bois des Fourreaux, but to the British infantry it was known as Highwood. The wood is on the D107 road, which runs from Martinpuich to Longueval. Before the Battle of the Somme, the wood was behind the German second line, which lay in front of Bazentin-le-Grand and Bazentin-le-Petit. The wood crowned a ridge which was about 100 feet high, which overlooked the ground around for a considerable distance. Any attack on the wood could be seen easily from the ridge which ran through the north end of the wood. Before the battle, the trees in the wood were undamaged, and the ground had not been damaged by shellfire. The wood was about halfway between Bazentin-le-Petit and Bazentin-le-Grand to the southwest, Martinpuich to the northwest, and Longueval to the southeast. Delville Wood lay 3,500 yards to the east. Prelude: German defensive preparations. Despite considerable debate among German staff officers, Falkenhayn laid down a continuation of the policy of unyielding defense. On the Somme front, the construction plan laid down by Falkenhayn in January 1915 had been completed. The reserve line, renamed the Second Line, was as well built and wide as the First Line, and had been built beyond the range of Allied field artillery, to force an attacker to stop and move field artillery forward before an attack. The Second Line had become the front line in the area of Highwood after the Battle of Bazentin Ridge on the 14th of July. German artillery was organized in a series of Foreststreifen for the simpler task of placing barrages on no man's land. Telephone lines between the German front lines and their artillery support were often cut, but the front line troops used signal flares to communicate with the artillery artillery. Highwood had grassy rides and many saplings in the undergrowth which impeded movement off the rides, and the wood had been fortified. British offensive preparations. General Henry Rawlinson, the 4th Army commander, planned an attack at dawn on the 14th of July, when there would be insufficient light for German machine gunners to see far ahead. 13th Corps was to attack with 2 divisions from Longueval to Bazentin-le-Grand, and 15th Corps was to attack from Bazentin-le-Petit to the northwest edge of Mametz Wood. 1 division of 3rd Corps was to attack further west. The British infantry was to cross up to 1,200 yards of no man's land in the dark and assemble close to the German second line. In this area the second line had become the front line after the British and French advances during the Battle of Albert. A preparatory bombardment began on the 11th of July, and a shortage of heavy artillery ammunition along with transport difficulties over wet and cut-up ground were eased by the air supremacy of the Royal Flying Corps, which made it impossible for the German air units to reconnoiter behind the British lines. On the 14th of July, the 9th Cavalry Brigade of the 2nd Indian Cavalry Division were to capture the Wood and the Switch line either side with 2 cavalry regiments, after which the 7th Division was to relieve the cavalry and the 21st Division was to advance and occupy the area between Bazentin-le-Petit and Martinpuich. The advance was expected to assist 3rd Corps to the west, when it attacked the German 2nd position and then combined with the 1st Division attack at 2:30 p.m. as the 34th Division probed towards Pozières in the west. Battle of Bazentin Ridge, 14-15 July. The 4th Army attacked Highwood with divisions from 15th Corps on the 14th of July. During the Battle of Bazentin Ridge, the wood was abandoned by the Germans, but delays meant that the British did not attempt to occupy it until 7:00 p.m. Rawlinson had ordered the 7th Division forward at 12:15 p.m., but the order was overruled by Lieutenant General Henry Horn, the 15th Corps commander, because the capture of Longueval on the flank of the proposed advance was incomplete. The 7th Division advanced and 2 battalions managed to occupy the southern half of the wood, after German reserves had arrived and counter-attacked several times. On the right flank, a squadron from each of the 7th Dragoon Guards and the 20th Deccan Horse of the 2nd Indian Cavalry Division had been ordered forward at 7:40 a.m., but took until early evening to make the way across trenches and devastated ground. The 20th Deccan Horse made the only cavalry charge of the Battle of the Somme against 3 Battalion Infantry Regiment 26 concealed in crops east of the wood. A crew of an aircraft of 3 Squadron RFC saw the infantry and cavalry advance, and the pilot dived at the German troops, strafing them from a height of 300 feet. The observer dropped a sketch of the German dispositions onto the cavalry before the aircraft departed, having been riddled by ground fire. Reserves of the 2nd Guard Division were incapable of assisting the defenders, as they had been caught by British machine gun fire as they moved up towards Bazentin-le-Petit, and machine gunners in Longueval were silenced by the cavalry machine guns. German heavy artillery had been withdrawn, and field artillery was unable to take aim at such a fast-moving target. About 100 Germans were killed or taken prisoner in the cornfields. 8 cavalrymen were killed. About 100 were wounded and 130 horses were killed or wounded. The cavalry took up a line from Longueval to the southern corner of Highwood until the early morning of the 15th of July and began to withdraw from 3:40 a.m. Alarmist reports that the British cavalry had broken through between Longueval and Pozières and were advancing beyond Highwood. reached their German 4th Corps and 2nd Army headquarters. General Fritz von Below, the German 2nd Army commander, put the 8th, 5th, 24th Reserve and 8th Bavarian Reserve divisions at the disposal of General 6th-Von the 4th Corps commander, to counter-attack the British breakthrough. When the truth emerged, the counter-attack was called off and the 5th and 8th Bavarian Reserve divisions went back into reserve. At 9:00 a.m. on the 15th of July, the 7th Division attacked the wood with the 91st Brigade. The British infantry were stopped by machine gun fire from the switch line where it ran through the wood. After a bombardment by German artillery, 2 Battalion, Infantry Regiment 165 of the 7th Division and 3 Battalion, Infantry Regiment 72 of the German 8th Division, which had relieved the 183rd Division, counter-attacked at 2:30 p.m. and recaptured part of the wood, until driven out by the Brigade Reserve. At 4:45 p.m., the British attacked after a bombardment which inflicted many casualties on the German infantry but failed to overwhelm the defenders. Highwood was not visible to British ground observers, and at 5:00 p.m., a 3-squadron reconnaissance reported that British troops were in the west of the wood and south of the Bazentin-le-Petit road. Flags were seen in the west side of the wood, but the east side was full of Germans and the switch trench was seen to be packed with German infantry. Highwood was judged to be untenable, and at 11:25 p.m. the 91st Brigade was withdrawn and the wood was bombarded by the divisional artillery. The 1/9th Highland Light Infantry of the 33rd Division had also attacked the wood at 9:00 a.m. on the 15th of July, during an attack on the switch line when 3 platoons advanced on the west side of the wood. Machine gun fire from the 2 and 3 battalions of Infantry Regiment 93 in Highwood hit the attackers from the flank and the attack was repulsed. The 16th Battalion, King's Royal Rifle Corps and the 2nd Worcesters were sent forward as reinforcements but were back on the start line by 4:00 p.m. 2 German infantry companies worked southwards from the switch line for 500 yards later in the evening, but a renewal of the counter-attack was found to be impossible, due to the tremendous volume of British barrage fire and the presence of British reconnaissance and artillery observation aircraft. July 2021 July the 33rd Division attacked again at dusk on the 19th of July, when a battalion from the 100th Brigade pushed advanced posts towards the wood from Bazentin-le-Petit as a flank guard. 2 battalions of the 19th Brigade crept forward on the 20th of July during a bombardment and attacked when it lifted at 3:25 a.m. The infantry got into the wood against machine gun fire from the 8th Division troops of 2 Battalion, Infantry Regiment 165 and part of 3 Battalion, Infantry Regiment 72 in the switch line and a strong point in the western corner. Observers of 3 Squadron flew over the wood and, despite mist, glimpsed enough to report that all but the north end of the wood had been captured, and in the evening reported the loss of the north end to a counter-attack. A 3rd Battalion on the right flank arrived and helped to occupy the southern portion of the wood, 30 Germans being taken prisoner. During the afternoon of the 21st of July, another battalion went forward and managed to reach the northern fringe of the wood. Due to the number of British casualties, 2 more battalions were sent forward as reinforcements, but as dark fell, a German bombardment forced the British from the north end of the wood, which was reoccupied by German troops near Fort Regal, and both sides dug in. During the fighting for Highwood, the 5th Division and 7th Division attacked the switch line to the east. The 51st Division relieved the 33rd Division after dark. 22-23 July, fog covered the area around Highwood until the 22nd of July. Vague reports of German digging in front of the switch line were confirmed when the crew of a 34 Squadron aircraft dived through the mist and saw a new German trench, several hundred yards in front of the switch trench, parallel to the British line from Bazentin-le-Petit to Highwood. This new intermediate line was full of German troops, and the 3rd Corps headquarters immediately cancelled the 19th Division attack on the switch line, to make the new line the first objective. On the night of 22-23 July, the 51st Division attacked Highwood with 2 battalions of the 154th Brigade at 1:30 a.m. to capture the rest of the wooden 600 yards of the switch line. The British bombardment had begun at 7:00 p.m. on the 22nd of July, under the direction of low-flying British artillery observation aircraft, which German sources reported was of painful accuracy and prevented the troops in Highwood from being relieved, despite the number of casualties caused by the shelling. One battalion lost direction in the wood and lost many casualties to machine gun fire. The 2nd Battalion attacked up a dip southwest of the wood but was also caught by machine gun fire from the intermediate line by 3:00 a.m. Both battalions were back on the start line, having lost 450 casualties. The Germans in the wood also suffered greatly in the hand-to-hand fighting. 3 Battalion, Infantry Regiment 165 of the 7th Division and part of I Battalion, Infantry Regiment 62 of the 12th Division, were reinforced from the switch line by I Battalion, Infantry Regiment 91. Early on the 23rd of July, British gunners had difficulty supporting attacks on Highwood, because they had to fire over Bazentin Ridge. The low elevation of the guns meant that shells skimmed the British trenches and the margin for error was small. Numerous complaints were made that British infantry casualties were caused by the British artillery. Worn guns, defective ammunition and inaccurate information about the location of British infantry positions were blamed for short shooting. The 51st Division pushed saps forward on the 2nd of August towards the switch line and dug a new trench near Wood Lane to the east of Highwood. August the 14th of September. August, the 33rd Division relieved the 51st Division and on the 11th of August, continued to push sap hits forward towards the switch line and dug a new trench closer to Wood Lane to the east. 2 large flamethrowers and pipe pushes were brought forward as both sides patrolled the area. On the 18th of August, a battalion of the 33rd Division attacked the wood, using the flamethrowers and 30 oil drums thrown by Liven's projectors, but the flamethrowers failed and the projectors were buried by British artillery fire which fell short. The pipe pushes fouled tree roots in the wood and one was deflected backwards, blowing a crater into the trench line of one of the attacking battalions. All attempts by the infantry to advance failed, although some troops broke into the German defences and were ejected by I Battalion, Infantry Regiment 134 and Infantry Regiment 104 recorded many casualties. On the 20th of August, the division attacked the wood with 1 battalion, to occupy a trench on the western edge of the wood. On the 24th of August, 3 battalions of the 100th Brigade attacked between Highwood and Delville Wood. On the night of 27-28 August, the 1st Division relieved part of the 33rd Division and next day attacked on the east side of the wood, advancing a short distance. The rest of the 33rd Division was relieved by the 24th Division on the 31st of August. The largest German counter-attack of the Battle of the Somme took place on the same day to the east of the wood, in the afternoon and evening. Troops of the 2nd Bavarian Corps and 12th Corps pushed one battalion into the eastern side of the wooded edge trench. September. On the 3rd of September, a 1st Brigade battalion of the 1st Division attacked in Highwood as part of the fighting for Guillemont, making another attempt to use the flamethrowers and Livens projectors. A mine with 3,000 pounds of explosives was sprung under the strongpoint at the east corner of the wood, 30 seconds before the infantry advance, which was then overrun by an infantry company and consolidated by an engineer field company. The pipe pushes blew back and a mortar bomb dropped short and set off the oil drums prematurely, causing much confusion among the attackers. Bombers worked towards the western flank, but a counter-attack by Bavarian Infantry Regiment 5 from the switch line at 3:00 p.m. forced the British back to the start line. At 6:00 p.m., a fresh battalion advanced to the middle of the wood and reached their objective on the right flank, but were checked in the left. An attack on the southwest face of the wood also reached the objective, and 2 companies of the 15th Division got into the west corner of the wood, and repulsed a German counter-attack with Lewis gunfire. Another counter-attack was defeated at 8:00 p.m., but the British then withdrew, except for one company which retired at 4:00 a.m. On the 8th of September, the 1st Division attacked the west end of the wood with 2 battalions at 6:00 p.m. The right-hand battalion reached its objective on the right, where German troops were found to be in wired shell craters but not on its left flank. The left-hand battalion attacked the southwest face and reached the objective, as a battalion of the 15th Division to the west captured a German trench beyond the west side of the wood. 2 German counter-attacks were repulsed, but the British were ordered to retire and by midnight were back on the start lines. About 50 prisoners of 3 Battalion, Bavarian Infantry Regiment 18 of the 3rd Bavarian Division were taken. Next day, the 1st Division attacked Highwood and German positions on the right flank. 2 battalions captured Wood Lane and 2 battalions attacked in the wood. After another mine was exploded 30 seconds before 0 hour, the crater was occupied, but the garrison was then bombed out by the Germans after 90 minutes, and an advance on the western side also failed. By the 14th of September, it was estimated that the British had suffered 6,000 casualties in the struggle for Highwood. Battle of Flers-Courcelette, the 15th of September, capture of Highwood. On the 15th of September, the 47th Division, which had relieved the 1st Division from 7 to 11 September, attacked the wood and the adjacent areas to the right and left with 2 brigades between the New Zealand and 50th Divisions. Due to the narrowness of no man's land in and around the wood, the British troops were withdrawn during the preliminary bombardment, but then sent forward again, and the creeping bombardment was fired 150 yards beyond the German front line. The artillery were given the wrong map coordinates, which led to the creeping barrage being fired another 100 yards further on. 4 of the 8 tanks allotted to the corps were substituted for a closer creeping bombardment at Highwood. The tanks advanced at 6:20 a.m. and 2 reached the south of the wood, but then turned east to find open ground. Tank D-22 lost direction, ditched in the British front line, and then fired on British troops by mistake. The second tank drove into a shell hole, but D-13 got into the wood and fired on Bavarian Infantry Regiment 18 in the German support line, until the tank was hit and set on fire. A German infantryman crept up on the tank and shot one of the crew in the leg through a loophole. The 4th tank broke down in no man's land. The fate of the 3 tanks was reported at 10:00 a.m. by the crew of a 34 Squadron contact patrol, who then flew back to the wood and saw that the attacks by the New Zealanders and the 50th Division had enveloped the wood, and the defenders of the switch trench nearby. On the return, the crew convinced the 3rd Corps headquarters to cancel an attack from the wood. The infantry advance into the wood had been stopped by machine gun fire, and in the melee, part of the 3 battalions advancing ready to attack the 2nd objective went into the wood and joined in. At 11:40 a.m., the 140th Trench Mortar Battery fired a hurricane bombardment of 750 mortar bombs into the wood in 15 minutes. The 34 Squadron crew made a second sortie, and at 12:30 p.m., watched as parties of Germans began to surrender to bombers working forward along the edges of the wood. Several hundred soldiers of Bavarian Infantry Regiment 23 of the 3rd Bavarian Division were taken prisoner, along with 6 machine guns and 2 heavy howitzers, and the survivors of the 141st Brigade captured the wood by 1:00 p.m. As night fell, the division had no organized front line, except on the extreme right, and only the first objective had been captured. Although this gave the British observation of the German defences northeastwards to Bapaume, the survivors of Bavarian Infantry Regiment 23 managed to rally beyond Martinpuich, and reinforcements from the 50th Reserve Division arrived and then counter-attacked with the remnants of the Bavarians at 5:30 p.m. The Germans managed to advance to within several hundred meters of Highwood and Martinpuich, and then dug in. Engineers of the 50th Division on the left of the 47th Division worked through 16-17 September, using bricks from Bazentin-le-Petit to fill shell holes in the road leading to Highwood, and dug Bose Trench to link the flanks of both divisions, which had been separated for 3 days. Tram lines were built west of the wood towards Eaucourt-l'Abbé and later extended to Bazentin-le-Petit, so that the wood could be avoided.